Welcome to the Dirt on Growing, where we don't just plant seeds, we plant ideas that challenge the norm. I'm your host, Brandon Rust from Fulcrop Sciences, and this is the podcast where living soil meets real science. From worm castings to bottled nutrients, microbial inoculants, and chemical pesticides, we're here to question the trends, break down the data, and empower your grow. It's time to think deeper and grow better. Welcome, everybody. I'm Brandon Rust, your host of the Dirt on Growing podcast, and today we're going to talk about humic and fulvic acids. So there's a lot of growers out there that struggle with things like nutrient lockout, weak soil biology, and declining yields. And I'm often asked, why, if I'm applying more inputs, am I seeing less results? So humic and fulvic acids offer a biological shortcut to unlock nutrients, improve soil function, and make every input more efficient. So let's get right on into it and let's talk about what are humic substances. So humic substances are the breakdown of products like plant and animal and microbial matter. And it's found in things like lignite, leonardite, compost. And there are three main fractions of humic substances. There's humic acids, fulvic acids, and humin. And you can think of these as kind of like carbon scaffolding that drives nutrient exchange and microbial health in soil. So let's get into a little bit about humic acids. Humic acids are a larger molecule. They're usually between 10,000 and 100,000 Daltons. They're dark brown to black in color, and they're water soluble in alkaline conditions or high pH ranges. So humic acid does a couple of things in soil. It increases cation exchange capacity, CEC. So what that allows soils to do is to hold on to more nutrients like calcium, magnesium, potassium, and micronutrients. However, humic acids offer more of a slow release of those nutrients for long-term availability. And again, they're soluble in higher pH ranges. So 7 and above. They chelate micronutrients like zinc and iron. And what they do is they bond to these large organic molecules and keep them attached in a metabolically available form to those carbon chains in the soil. Humic acids also help to buffer salts and heavy metals, reducing stress. One of the benefits and one of the things that I always like to talk about when we're talking about improved soil health and fertility, improved health, the decreasing heavy metal uptake. When we're talking about heavy metal remediation, my mind always goes to humic acids because humic acids hold on and grab onto those heavy metals, and they will keep them insoluble unless they are in an alkaline condition. So if you're running a soil system and you are in the optimal pH range, which is typically between 6.3 and 7, the humic acid will hold on to those heavy metals, keeping them unavailable, keeping them fixed in the soil. They also, because of their molecular size, they improve soil structure, and they do that by binding soil particles together. They help aggregate soil, and what that does is it offers better aeration, water penetration, and water holding capacity. And so when you improve soil structure, the ability for that system to exchange gas and hold and retain water, it causes a cascade of events that stimulates things like the microbiome, which will increase the secondary metabolite production and solubilize more nutrients, breaks down organic matter, and provides beneficial phytohormones that can help stimulate that plant soil system and the interactions that are happening there. Now, fulvic acids differ from humic acids in their molecular size, so usually between 500 and 2,000 daltons. They're yellow to golden in color, and they are soluble across all pH ranges. So when fulvic acid chelates or binds with micronutrients, macronutrients, secondary nutrients, it keeps them in a metabolically available form across all pH ranges. So when you have nutrient ions that are carbon chelated to the fulvic acid, pH is no longer pH is no longer, the pH of those no longer affects uptake. If you look at, pH nutrient charts, it shows the pH ranges that nutrients are best absorbed at. But when they are carbon chelated, when they are attached to the fulvic acid, they are available at any range. So that is one of the main benefits and the driving factors for fulvic acids. Now, they also have the ability to penetrate plant cell membranes, carrying nutrients directly into plant tissue. This is because of their small molecular size. When they grab onto those nutrient ions, and because of that size, the plant can passively uptake the fulvic acid and anything that is attached to that fulvic acid, that is chelated with that fulvic acid. They act as biostimulants. So fulvic acid increases enzyme activity and stimulates root growth, and it improves photosynthesis. One of the ways that plants naturally take up nutrient ions is through active transport mechanisms, which takes metabolic energy. When you bypass these active transport mechanisms, what happens is you are able to save metabolic energy. Also, when you have improved nutrient uptake and you have a greater capacity to take up things like nitrogen and magnesium and sulfur and iron, that is also directly responsible for the increase in photosynthetic capacity. So, the chelation of micronutrients is one of the most important aspects, because of all the things that I just mentioned, the availability factor, the saving metabolic energy factor, the increase in photosynthesis factor, the increase in enzymatic activity within the actual plant itself. Fulvic acids also provide antioxidants that reduce stress, because during normal metabolism, the plants are producing these oxidizing compounds, things like H2O2, and they can disrupt cellular membranes and they can kind of tear apart different things. And so the plant has to produce these oxygen reactive species that neutralize these oxidative compounds. And that process is expedited. The plant can create more of these antioxidants to prevent oxidation of cellular compartments. And this can happen for a lot of reasons. Oxidation stress occurs. Maybe you have too much light. Maybe the temperature of your rooms or the environment is too hot, and it speeds up all of those processes and cause oxidation. One of the things that you can see with oxidation, if you've got too much light, you can see the yellowing, right, of the plant at the tops of the plant. It's because that chlorophyll is basically being oxidized, it's being broken down, it's not working efficiently, and it's causing yellowing at the top of your canopy. One of the things that fulvic acids, the main benefits, that is a big pain point, I feel like, for cultivators, is fertilizer cost. So when you're able to add fulvic acids in high quantities to chelate nutrients, it increases their use efficiency. It decreases precipitation reactions. A good example of this is the reaction that happens between phosphate and calcium. They bond together to create calcium phosphate, and calcium phosphate is not available to plants. So when you chelate that phosphorus and you chelate that calcium, they don't bond together, so it decreases that precipitation reaction, making it so that those nutrient ions are bioavailable to the plant and can be easily and passively transported. When you're able to increase the use efficiency of your fertilizer, you don't have to add as much into that system. It just needs to be balanced. So those are the main benefits of humic and fulvic acid. But here are some key differences. So the size and solubility. So humic acids are large, soil focused, while fulvic acids are small and plant penetrating. Humic improves the reservoir of nutrients in soil, while fulvic acid delivers them into the plant. Humic is often soil applied, while fulvic acids can be used in foliar applications, fertigation, and hydroponics. The benefit of that fulvic acid as a foliar spray in conjunction with things like Epsom salt, your magnesium sulfate, or your CalMag sprays, or micronutrient sprays, or things like Agsil 16, which is potassium silicate. When you add the fulvic acid into those products, it grabs on to those nutrient ions and delivers them through the plant stomata much more efficiently. So it's such a good product to use for foliar applications. Now, humic acids aren't going to have the same ability as fulvic acids to be able to penetrate and deliver nutrients into the cell because of the molecular size. But together they create a significant effect when it comes to building soil fertility, nutrient availability, driving microbial mediated processes, offering energy, and mitigating stress responses from things like heavy metals, salinity, stress, and drought stress, and water stress. So, in the scientific studies, it shows that humic acids can increase the cation exchange capacity between 20 and 70%. That is a significant improvement in the soil's ability to hold on to nutrient ions. Significant. When you're talking about that type of increase, the decrease in fertilizer can be exponential. And when we're thinking about efficiency across agriculture, whether it's indoor, greenhouse, conventional cropping, fertilizers are typically one of the biggest costs. So if you can implement humic and fulvic acids into your fertilizer practices, you can drastically reduce costs, reduce environmental impacts, reduce things like runoff, and increase the use efficiency of what you're putting in there. Fulvic acids chelate and transport over 70 trace minerals. Okay, oftentimes when we think about plant nutrition, we think of NPK, secondary nutrients, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and micronutrients, iron, manganese, copper, zinc, boron, molybdenum, nickel. But there are a huge plethora of different trace minerals that may not have the scientific backing that the conventionally, macro, secondary micronutrients, but do function and do help aid different things in plants. I'll give you an example, iodine. There's more and more research showing that iodine in small quantities can have significant impacts on both plant quality and yields. So when you're able to transport trace minerals, it can have a huge stimulating impact on that plant system overall and that soil system. Research also shows improved chlorophyll content, root length, and biomass in crops treated with humic and fulvic acid. Again, this goes back to nutrient use efficiency, but it also goes into the microbial drivers that are stimulated by humic and fulvic acids when they are producing things like auxin or cytokinin. Auxins like indole-3 acetic acid are natural rooting hormones, and they increase root biomass. And when you increase root biomass, you're increasing the surface area of those roots. And when you increase that surface area, you can think about this in terms of thermodynamics. When you increase that surface area, you have a greater capacity to uptake nutrients and create reactions in the soil from things like the root exudations. So stimulating root biomass is one of the key benefits. Soil structure, water holding capacity, microbial drivers. They also and then also humic and fulvic acids help to sequester atmospheric carbon in stable soil fractions, aligning with regenerative agriculture goals. So when your soil, when crop biomass is being converted into stable humus, it offers long-term carbon storage. And any time that you can increase carbon storage in your soils, it's going to increase your phosphorus cycling, your nitrogen cycling, your micronutrient cycling, your carbon cycling. And that is going to have a positive impact, not just on your soil system, but on our environment overall. So there's so many benefits to humic and fulvic acids, but understanding each individually is really important so you can focus on what your goal is and achieving that goal. If your goal is to make it so that heavy metals are tied up in soil, I wouldn't use fulvic acid for that. I would use humic acid. If you're trying to stimulate microbiologic functions and chelate nutrients, I would go towards fulvic acid for that. But both of them work synergistically together, so oftentimes it's best to just use both. So, consumer pain points. Some of the things that I think humic and fulvic acid can really help with is, maybe your fertilizers aren't working as well anymore. The humics improve soil storage, nutrient storage, so you can use less. Maybe it's not that you're not adding enough fertilizer, that your fertilizer isn't working, but it could often be that the nutrients are out of balance. Those nutrients are causing pH fluctuations in your media, or there's just too much of them. So adding humic and fulvic acid can help mitigate these things. It can help with pH stabilization, organic complexion of those nutrients to keep them stored and or available. Can help stimulate that microbiome to help cycle those nutrients to keep them in a metabolically available form. So oftentimes when we're looking and thinking about fertilizer and how to apply it, how much should be used, how much is already in my soils, oftentimes it's not necessary to really add more nutrition, but just help with the availability of what's already there. And that is one of the main benefits of the humic and fulvic acids. Humics also restore organic carbon to feed the microbes. So if you're dealing with soil, let's say you've got old soil, it's dried out, it's just not that good, it doesn't contain a lot of organic matter, and you don't feel like it's really cycling nutrients properly, adding in those humic and fulvic acids can help stimulate those processes, right? It can help revitalize your soil. It can help with water retention, gas exchange, microbial driven processes, nutrient cycling, phosphorus cycling, carbon cycling. You can use these in conjunction with microbial inputs to revitalize soil and bring that soil back to life. And again, fertilizer efficiency is one of the things that we really want to focus on, and one of the things that I focus on at Fulcrop Science, because if we can use less, even if you're not doing organic, conventional fertilizer practices, anytime we're able to use less inputs, we can decrease the environmental impact. And for me, that's a win, man, because I like clean water. I like water that can be pulled right out of the aquifer in our wells and not have to be treated. So it's got so many benefits. Another thing is salinity. So oftentimes agricultural water that we're using for fertigation can oftentimes contain high sodium, and that causes issues. It can antagonize different nutrients. It can block out things like calcium and magnesium and potassium. Humics buffer salts and reduce ion toxicity. And the reason why humic acid is really efficient at that is because when you increase the cation exchange capacity, those are like the parking lots, the spaces in the soil that hold on to nutrients. And if you have too high of something like sodium in your solution, or you have too high of total parts per million of nutrients in your system, you can use that humic acid to kind of grab onto those and decrease what's in solution. And it doesn't decrease the overall system's nutrition. It's just decreasing the solubility of those in the instance that they are too high, because too much nutrients, too many ions can cause osmotic stress, because that water that the plant is taking up is so filled with nutrient ions, it's difficult to take that water up. So, if you're looking for a natural and sustainable option to increase soil health and fertility and improve all of these different processes, and you want to do it organically, from things that are naturally derived and they're going to improve that long-term soil health and fertility, humic and fulvic acids are an amazing option. Now, I just want to get into some practical application tips so that way you guys know how to use these. So, applying humic acid to soil at planting or during irrigation for long-term soil health, for long-term nutrient release, humic acids, okay? Fulvic acids you can use for foliar sprays during key growth stages when you are trying to efficiently deliver nutrient ions, like in vegetative, or transition, or when you have really high flowering crops and you want to deliver nutrients. Let's say that you might be running a water only type of soil, but there are certain stages of growth where you really want to make sure you have a good solubility of those nutrients. Those are the times that you should be adding in fulvic acid to help increase the delivery of those nutrients and the solubility of those nutrients. Now, humic and fulvic acids can both be tank mixed. They can be added with fertilizers, but you want to make sure that if you're going to add humic and fulvic acids, that you take the proper steps, because again, it is going to increase the use efficiency of your fertilizer. So oftentimes you need to decrease anywhere between 20 up to 60% decrease in fertilizer usage. And this key point is one of the reasons why that when I look at the science that shows humic acids or fulvic acids decrease the over cannabinoid content in cannabis, I associate with that with the over fertilization, especially with nitrogen, due to the increased use efficiency of those fertilizers during those science projects and while those papers. I think that if these papers were reevaluated with someone like myself, who's an agronomist and understands cannabis nutrition, understands plant nutrition, soil microbial interactions, plant microbial interactions, then we would see something drastically different. Because across all testing that I have done, I have not seen a decrease in cannabinoid content or terpene content. It is only when you over fertilize with especially with nitrogen is the main driver of the decrease in cannabinoid content, terpene content, then it can. Now, and the benefit of humic and fulvic acids, and I want to talk a little bit about, they can be used in any system. It doesn't matter if it's a natural cropping system with natural soil, a modified growing mix, or a living soil, if it's in cocoa, if it's in rock wool, if it's in DWC. They are efficient and work very well across all growing styles. However, there is a huge difference between soluble humic fulvic acids and a lot of the products that are on the market. I'm going to give you a good example, and I've used this example before. Down to earth fertilizers, humic acid is derived from leonardite. Now, leonardite is a great source of humic and fulvic acids, but unfortunately, this product is just the raw material that's been crushed. To get the real benefits, you have to extract pure humic and fulvic acid from the leonardite or from the lignite, because what you're doing when you just crush it up, it's still trapped in a mineral matrix. And so the microbiology doesn't have access to that humic and fulvic acid, and it's not going to do all of the things that I just said. The humic acid isn't going to increase your CEC. It may help slightly with improved soil structure. The fulvic acid, if it's not soluble, right, it's not going to chelate nutrients and deliver them efficiently. It's not going to stimulate the soil microbiome. So when you're thinking about humic and fulvic acid products, typically the liquid forms are the ones that are the extracted, unless you can find powders that have been extracted and then dehydrated. However, oftentimes, because they are so attracted to water, if you get powdered fulvic acid, if it is not completely dry or you get it into an environment that has any type of moisture, it often turns into just a big blob of goop because it naturally wants to absorb that water. So that's one of the things to be aware of, is how the humic and fulvic acid is being produced. If it is just a crushed up product, you are not going to get the benefits of that humic and fulvic acid. So that was my little presentation. I'm going to open it up to Q&A here. I'm going to go through some of these questions that have come in. I appreciate everybody joining the podcast. Don't forget to smash that like button. It helps push these types of posts to people who may not be aware that we are here. I hope everybody had a great Labor Day. What's up, Marcus? We're going to be doing more of these podcasts. We're not going to be doing them every single day. We're going to space them out because we want to get more detailed, start putting in images. I'm going to look for a better camera because my face on it looks so white and bright. So we're going to be adjusting things as we go and making everything as professional as we possible can, so that way we can provide you guys with the best content, keep it engaging. Here we go. So if I'm using fulvic acid, will it make anything over 7 pH available? Yeah. So when Fulvic acid, when you have an abundance of it in a system, right? Nutrient ions that are free and liberated, whether that's from conventional salts or whether that is from the breakdown and liberation from compost or organic material, that fulvic acid it'll bind, and because there's a dynamic that's happening with the hydrogen in those functional groups, COO, carboxylic acid. So it makes these chains of these carboxylic groups, and anytime that there's hydrogen, COOH, right? That's the group, carbon, oxygen, oxygen, hydrogen. That hydrogen can share that spot with a metal alloyed ion, calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, zinc, manganese, all of those things. And so typically, if we were going to look at something like iron, for instance, iron is metabolically available in its ferric form, its divalent form, at a pH range below about 5.5. Once you start going above 5.5, it starts to oxidize quicker and quicker as that pH range goes up, as there's more oxygen and aeration in that system. But when that divalent cation, that iron, binds to the fulvic acid, it's no longer dependent on a low pH for uptake. And that happens with a bunch of these micronutrients, a bunch of these other nutrients. If molybdenum, for instance, is available at a higher pH range, but your regular soil is sitting at 6 or 6.3, you're still going to have high availability. It does not matter what pH range the nutrient is in if it is organically complexed to the fulvic acid. It's one of the main benefits. Solubility across all pH ranges. Marcus Greensome asks, what is Humic, the bioag humic acid concentrate? I have no idea. I haven't used bioag in probably 12 years. I'm not really looking at a lot of other people's products unless I'm doing a comparative analysis. And I've already done a comparative analysis to bioag versus our humic and fulvic acid, and there's just no comparison. One, as a standalone humic and fulvic acid product, our humate fertilizers have exponentially more fulvic acid than any product on the market, but there is no other product on the market that is a complete NPK fertilizer with that amount of humic and fulvic acid. G Money says, I sprayed my plants this morning with Epsom salt and fulvic and full power fulvic. It's a great combination. Marcus Greensome says, the K-Humates has my flowering plants on point, frosty and stanky. Microbe Plus has been making them pray. Yeah, all the products are great. All science-backed. Here's a question. I spray my plants every 3 days with Epsom salt. Every 3 days, that's fine. I recommend twice a week. Yes, the Black D is available on the website. There's not many packs left. There's probably less than 8. Somebody asks me, have I ever heard of Mark Nature's fulvic and humic acids? I have not. If my run comes out better, I'm going to praise you, bro. Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm telling you, this is why I'm here. I'm here for you guys because I know there's a lot of people that may be new. Even if you're experienced, man, I'm always learning. And one of the things that I like to do is if I learn something new, I like to talk about it. I like to talk about it because it helps me retain that information. So I love doing these things. I appreciate all of you guys coming and joining. If you guys have pain points, let me know what those pain points are in your growing, because I would love to come up with different solutions to figure out what it is to get past and move ahead. Yeah, this is another true statement. Not sure says fulvic acids are fast acting. Yes, they deliver nutrients directly through the plant stomata, through the plant root membranes. Humic acids increase CEC and allow for long-term availability. Here we go. We got another question from Clownfish. How long does it take for humic acid to start working? So humic acids, again, if they're not just leonardite crushed up, the humic and fulvic acids work immediately. The fulvic acid will work immediately to chelate and deliver nutrients. It'll help stabilize pH. The fulvic acid will immediately work as a biostimulant. It's fast. It's instant. Humic acids, same thing, but you may not see an immediate response because the plant isn't going to react. The biology isn't going to react to humic acid the way it will fulvic acid. Fulvic acid is the fucking powerhouse of humus. Now, the larger molecule for the humic acid will increase and improve soil structure. It'll increase water retention. It'll increase air and gas exchange, and that happens relatively quick. Now, if you're adding that as an inoculant, if you're just waiting for organic material to decompose and convert into humic and fulvic acids, the amount of humic and fulvic acids that are provided through decomposition are not as high as you would if you were to inoculate or use a product. The percentage of humic acid naturally in soils is less than 1% of the organic matter. So let's say you have 2% organic matter in your soil, less than, 0.5% of that will even be, humic and fulvic acids or humus, which is stabilized organic matter. My local grow shop is low on options for soil. I'm forced to use ocean forest, strawberry fields. Not the end of the world, but it would work better with bokashi. I mean, all those, they start off with the same base. The only difference about my soil is I have much more amendments, and we're looking at soil data to make sure they're balanced. But we only provide bulk soil, 6 yards or more at a time. And the reason why is because that's, one, the minimum quantity that we can produce at once. And then two, like the shipping for a 1 cubic foot or a 2 cubic foot bag is exponentially more than the price of the bag itself. So from a logistics standpoint, DTC or direct to consumer soil sales doesn't make sense from a logistics standpoint. It would only make sense if we had large distribution that was supplying different garden stores from a distribution center where they're purchasing, hundreds of pallets at a time, and they can get we can give them a price where we can decrease because of the bulk quantity, and then they can distribute it. But if you use if you get a soil test and you use the nutrient calculator on the website, it'll build you a recipe for any soil to be able to bring that soil to nutritional sufficiency and have everything be balanced. But all of those soil, any soil will work great. I mean, if you're going to get, like, let's say the master bundle pack, which has the top dress amendments, the microbes, and the humate fertilizer, you could start with Fox Farm or Happy Frog or 707 or Roots Organic or any of those things, and you can add in, the top dress amendments, and you can use the humates and the microbes to bring that soil up to nutritional sufficiency and make sure you have everything you need. we got Chilbert out of UK. How would you use humic in cocoa setup? Any different? So if you're doing like a hydroponic setup and you're running cocoa, and let's say you're running, I don't know, drip hydro, or like a dry powder line or something like that, the way that you would use the fulvic acid would be as an additive. So you would add in your fulvic acid before you start blending your nutrients. Now, you could also do this after if you're trying to read your ppms of your nutrients. But what you do is essentially you add in you can add in your nutrients. You can, pH everything, you can calibrate everything, but you would want to decrease the amount that you're adding as far as your fertilizer, decrease between 20 to 60%, depending on how much fulvic acid you're mixing in there. But you mix it with the fulvic acid, and what happens is when those nutrient ions from the salt, right? Let's say you have DAP, diammonium phosphate. The ammonium and the phosphate, the positively charged ammonium, it disassociates itself from the negatively charged phosphate in the presence of water. And so you have these liberated charged ions. Now, what will happen is the fulvic acid will bind with these ions, increasing the use efficiency. So you can use far less of that fertilizer. And that's for hydroponics. Doesn't matter if you're DWC, if you're in rock wool, if you're in cocoa. This is across all hydroponics. If you're using like a base conventional salt fertilizer, adding the fulvic acid to that is going to increase the delivery, the efficiency of that. And then also, I also recommend decreasing the amount of runoff, or maybe completely decrease runoff completely from these systems, because when you're chelating those nutrients, they're being held in that media, right, in an available form. So you don't want to rinse that out, because it's counterproductive to the logistics of what you're doing, right? If you're going to use fulvic acids, it helps to stabilize pH, helps stabilize nutrients, decreases nutrient interaction, so that way your media can hold on to those longer. You don't want to flush that out. Yep. Cole says, it was my second round of Epsom salt spray yesterday, and I swear they were craving it, and it works beautifully. I'm telling you. It's a big pro tip. Everybody so far that is doing this has come back and thanked me. Next auction or giveaway? Probably next week. Next week we might do one. Do I spray with my lights on? That's a good question. I do. I spray pretty much everything with my lights on. However, if I'm doing something like something that's oil-based, I dim my lights, because I don't want the temperature at my canopy to be really hot, because it can burn plants. It can cause phototoxicity, where you're increasing the temperature of whatever that product is, and it can often cause damage. A good example of this is enzymes. When you increase the temperature of an enzyme, it works more efficiently. That's why when you spray something like Flying Skull or Dr. Zymes, you want to do it with your lights dimmed or the lights off, so that way that enzyme doesn't get warm and cause a little spotting on your plants. But mostly, it's really about the temperature at the canopy, and then also if you have a water droplet, right, and it acts like a magnifying glass, and you have light going through it, it can heat up, cause heat spots on your plants, and that's what you see oftentimes as spray burn. Chad Westport asked, did you ever get analysis of the study showing reduced TC, tissue culture, levels using humic in mid to late? Oh, THC. Did you ever get your analysis of the study? I didn't do any study, but I did look at the studies that you told me about, where they said that humic and fulvic acid decreased the total cannabinoid. And I would correlate that to an increased nutrient use efficiency and over fertilization, especially with things like nitrogen. So when you over fertilize nitrogen, decreases cannabinoid and terpene content, And when you add humic and fulvic acids, if you're adding the same amount of nitrogen that you were before, you're probably over fertilizing. And so I think that those peer-reviewed science studies that show a reduction in cannabinoids in cannabis with the use of humic and fulvic acids are absolutely incorrect. I would challenge the authors of that any day in a conversation, specifically because I understand nutrient dynamics. I understand the target levels for cannabis, and I have a comprehensive understanding of soil nutrient dynamics, soil microbial dynamics, and plant microbial dynamics. Seeds are no longer an option appear on the website. They actually are. Seeds are still available, but they're at Bokashi Seed Vault, bokashiseedvault.com. We separated the seeds from the website because we separated all cannabis out of the website, because these products, while they work extremely efficiently in cannabis, they were really designed for specialty crops and conventional cropping systems. However, if you go to the drop-down menu on the Bokashi nutrient website, if you click on seeds, it'll take you to the other website. I do not understand this question. What's your thoughts of drops of bounds? That doesn't make sense to me. Let's see if we got any more questions in here. Here's one. How often should I use the humate fertilizer in a native soil garden? My dad has been growing vegetables since 1974 and tilling in all the broader waste. A lot of organic matter in there. Yeah, so, tilling isn't necessarily detrimental. I recommend disking and tilling at the start if you're switching from conventional cropping methods to a no-till or regenerative style. When it comes to the humate fertilizer and the application rates, it depends on crop type, but typically once every 3 to 4 weeks, at least for crops that are quickly growing and produce an abundance of flowers and fruit like tomatoes, peppers, cannabis. However, it's really based on soil health and fertility, because if you've got a soil that's really healthy, it's really fertile, it's got a lot of nutrients already, you can do less applications, because what's going to happen is the fulvic and humic acid is going to create more bioavailability with what's already in that soil and improve the uptake of what's already there while simultaneously providing NPK, secondary, and micronutrients. Can you foliar apply iron with fulvic acids? Absolutely, and I recommend it. If you're having an iron deficiency in soil and you're not sure how much you should be adding into your media, taking something like a teaspoon, maybe a couple of teaspoons per gallon of water of iron sulfate along with fulvic acid can help deliver that iron directly through the plant stomata. And iron is a photosynthetic nutrient. So there's a couple that are listed, nitrogen, magnesium, iron, sulfur. Those are all photosynthetic nutrients because they're all responsible for the production of chlorophyll. Here's a good question. So I already have the down-to-earth humic in my fabric pots. I reuse the soil. Will it ever break down? So that humic acid is mineralized, and it would take, probably years for it to really, and I don't know if you're going to see a huge benefit. Again, you need to have extracted pure humic and fulvic acids, or products that have been extracted, as opposed to just the mineral that's been ground up. Low pH will help break that down and solubilize it. Microbes, so having a lot of carbon and good biology will help expedite that process, but it could take, months to years depending on conditions. So 1212 Life says, I've seen these humic acid reports and always wondered if that was true, as soil naturally should have humic acid in it. The problem with conventional soils, that these are the soils that are outside, typically they contain less than 2 to 3% of organic carbon, and only a fraction of a percent of that is actually humic acid, or fulvic acid. So the quantities that naturally exist in soils are pretty low, unless you're in areas that are heavy forested, rainforests. Then you'll see higher quantities of humified material. Yes, this is exactly where my mind goes, Chad Westport. When I talking about those science white papers, and again, I would go and I would debate with them about understanding cannabis nutrient requirements, because when it comes to the university studies and stuff like that, I've looked at these. I mean, last year I looked at a report out of Cornell, and they were just trying to figure out what the NPK values should be. And it's like, dude, I'm well past that. I'm 7 years past understanding, what the proper ratios of nutrients should be for hemp and cannabis. Here's another question from Stay Frosted. He asks, hey, thanks for all you do in the community. What's your thoughts on correcting pH level? Do you suggest doing it with nutrient or without until it's correct? So for me, I personally use really clean water. It's well water, and I don't pH any of my water. If I was having a pH problem with my water, I would figure out what's causing that pH fluctuation in the water itself by getting a water test, and then I would take corrective measures to filter that so the water is clean. When we're talking about correcting pH issues in soil, humic and fulvic acids can help buffer pH, but things like high calcium ag lime, dolomitic lime, calcium silica, I usually pH the media. Don't worry so much about the water as long as the water's clean. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys joining. We're just coming up on an hour. We'll be doing another live tomorrow on plant training, and I'll see if I can't get a special guest on. Maybe I could have Chad Westport come on in here. Anyway, I appreciate you guys joining. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe to the channel. And if you guys like this podcast, go check out the products at bokashiearthworks.net. I'll see you guys soon.